For centuries, China and India were two of the richest civilizations on Earth, centers of trade, innovation, and culture. Both produced incredible inventions, massive empires, and global trade networks. Yet today, when we look at economic growth, something remarkable has happened. China has surged ahead, becoming the world's second-largest economy, while India, despite its enormous potential, has lagged behind. How did two nations with similar histories and populations take such different paths? To understand this, we have to look at history, policy, society, and the choices that shaped their destinies. For much of history, both India and China were global powerhouses. China's Han, Tang, and Song dynasties dominated trade, technology, and governance, while India contributed 25 to 30% of global GDP through agriculture, textiles, and trade. Both civilizations had highly skilled populations, advanced infrastructure for their time, and a rich culture of science, mathematics, and philosophy. Ancient India gave the world zero, algebra, and the decimal system, while China invented paper, gunpowder, printing, and the compass. Both nations had flourishing cities, vibrant trade networks, and sophisticated governance. Yet, the paths diverged sharply over the last 300 years. One of the first turning points was colonial influence. India fell under British colonial rule, which dismantled thriving industries, imposed heavy taxation, and exported both wealth and food. The Bengal famine of 1943 killed around 3 million people, not because of drought, but because food was diverted to support the British war effort in urban centers. The once thriving Indian textile industry was deliberately crushed to make way for British imports. India inherited a wounded economy at independence in 1947, with low literacy, restricted industrial capacity, and centuries of suppressed entrepreneurship. China faced its own challenges: the Opium Wars, foreign concessions, and internal rebellions, but it was never fully colonized. China maintained sovereignty over most of its land and resources, which meant that by the time the Communist Party took control in 1949, the government had the ability to implement nationwide policies without the structural weaknesses imposed by colonial rule. This difference in sovereignty meant that China could start reforming its economy with control and coordination at a scale India simply could not match immediately after independence. After independence, India adopted a centrally planned economy, inspired partly by socialist principles and the Soviet model. The government controlled major industries, imposed heavy regulations on private enterprise, and enforced the license Raj, a system of permits and approvals so complex that starting a business could take years. Entrepreneurs had to navigate multiple levels of bureaucracy, and innovation was slowed by regulatory bottlenecks. For example, Dhirubhai Ambani, who would later build Reliance Industries into a global conglomerate, faced endless hurdles just to start small textile operations. Meanwhile, agricultural modernization lagged. Farmers struggled with outdated techniques, debt, and inconsistent government support, particularly in Punjab and Maharashtra. China took a different approach, after decades of initial socialist centralization. Starting in 1978, under Deng Xiaoping, China embraced market-oriented reforms. The government created special economic zones, SEZs, beginning with Shenzhen, which offered incentives for foreign investment, industrial innovation, and manufacturing. These zones became testing grounds for policies that would be gradually applied nationwide. Factories, ports, and cities appeared almost overnight, producing goods not just for domestic consumption, but for global export. Citizens were directly incentivized to work, innovate, and increase productivity, creating a self-reinforcing loop of growth. Education and workforce development illustrate the contrast even more clearly. In India, government programs like Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan aim to universalize primary education, but implementation has been uneven. Rural schools often lack trained teachers, libraries, or reliable electricity. A student in rural Bihar or Uttar Pradesh may have the talent to become a software engineer or entrepreneur, but without the right infrastructure, mentorship, or digital access, opportunity remains limited. China, in contrast, invested heavily in nationwide education and vocational training. By the 1990s, it had produced a massive, literate, and skilled workforce ready for industrial and technological jobs. Policies were uniform, monitored centrally, and scaled quickly. Infrastructure is another area where the differences were stark. China built thousands of kilometers of highways, railways, airports, and urban housing projects in a matter of decades. Megacities grew almost overnight, like Shenzhen and Shanghai, with factories, ports, and urban amenities all coordinated. India, by contrast, faced decades of slow infrastructure development. Projects like the Golden Quadrilateral Highway Network or new metro lines often suffered delays from land acquisition disputes, local opposition, and bureaucratic hurdles. Even today, India's massive population makes infrastructure scaling a marathon rather than a sprint. Urbanization has created modern hubs like Mumbai and Bangalore, but also sprawling slums where millions live without reliable water, electricity, or sanitation. Population policy also played a role. China implemented the one-child policy, which, despite its controversies, allowed for focused investments in each child's education, health, and development. India's population growth continued at a faster rate, stretching government resources and making it more difficult to deliver quality education, healthcare, and jobs at scale. This meant that while India produced many talented individuals, the system could not support them all efficiently. Social structures further influenced outcomes. China's uniform, centrally coordinated policies meant that reforms reached nearly everyone, creating a feedback loop. Reforms enabled productivity, productivity rewarded effort, and success reinforced policy adoption. India's diversity, 28 states, hundreds of languages, and deep social hierarchies created fragmentation in policy execution. A reform that works well in Kerala might be delayed or fail in Uttar Pradesh. India's democracy encourages debate and accountability, but it can also slow rapid policy implementation that China achieved with centralized authority. The results of these divergent approaches are striking. China's GDP grew at an average of 9 to 10% per year for 3 decades, lifting hundreds of millions out of poverty and transforming the country into a global manufacturing and technological powerhouse. India, while improving steadily after the 1991 liberalization reforms, grew at around 6 to 7% per year, leaving tens of millions still living in poverty. India's tech sector and middle class are impressive, yet the majority of citizens still face challenges in education, healthcare, and infrastructure access. Examples illustrate the difference further. China. Shenzhen SEZ becomes a global electronics hub. High-speed rail connects cities. Vocational programs create skilled labor. India. Digital India improves access to banking and government services, but many villages still lack internet or electricity. Farmer subsidy programs exist, but are inconsistently applied. Mega infrastructure projects often take decades to complete. Citizen behavior and entrepreneurship also played a role, but it had to operate within systems that empower or obstruct growth. In China, individuals could participate in industries that rewarded innovation immediately. In India, even the most talented individuals were slowed by bureaucracy, uneven education, or social barriers. Yet the Indian population is resilient. Millions of Indians are hardworking, innovative, and entrepreneurial. The ingredients for future acceleration are already in place. Healthcare highlights the differences too. China invested heavily in public health, vaccination programs, and hospital infrastructure. India, despite programs like Ayushman Bharat, still struggles with uneven quality and access in rural regions. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed these gaps. Hospitals and urban centers could cope, while rural areas faced shortages of beds, oxygen, and medical staff. Ultimately, the story isn't about blame. It's about policy choices, execution, and the interaction with citizens' lives. China's rise demonstrates the impact of centralized coordination, targeted incentives, and rapid implementation. India's slower path shows the challenges of a massive democracy, social diversity, and delayed reforms. Yet India's potential is enormous. The same population that built one of the richest civilizations in history, now skilled, ambitious, and digitally connected, could propel the country to unprecedented heights if policy execution, infrastructure, and inequality are addressed effectively. So the question isn't just, why did China rise while India lagged? The real question is, how fast can India harness its history, governance, and people to achieve its extraordinary potential? And when it does, the global economy, technology, and innovation will all feel the impact of a nation finally fulfilling centuries of promise.